We've got 6 different stories to cover here, guys, from stories outside the UK. It's time for another episode of the World Newsround. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with another episode of the World's Newsround, where I cover various different stories from outside of the UK, all in one video. And we start here with, as the Association Press, with the headline that Israelis watch Netanyahu's Congress speech closely. For many, it was both uplifting and depressing. I would probably say more depressing for the world rather than what Israel has done. But obviously, there are some Israelis who are obviously firmly behind. Understandably so, because their mindsets are to believe of what they are doing is just and right, of what's happening inside Gaza, when most people with conscious and morale know that what's happening is absolutely disgusting and atrocious. I think it was utterly shameful of America to allow him once again to speak in Congress. This was apparently his 4th time that Benjamin Netanyahu has done this, and it may potentially be even a 5th down the road, potentially, if he continues to hold on to power. There was, while they all turned up in solidarity to support Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, there were obviously some who chose not to turn up. There were even 1 or 2 congresswomen who dressed themselves in Palestinian colours, which I thought was a nice touch to show their defiance of Benjamin Netanyahu. I thought was very good, was a very nice touch as well. I did see some of the highlights of the speech. Didn't watch the full speech, but I just, to me, it was just like a lot of regurgitating of how much the relationship between America and Israel is so strong, pretty much about how much the needs to destroy Hamas, release the hostages. Some of the usual regurgitating theme that you've heard from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Speaker, Mike Johnson, referred to Benjamin Netanyahu as His Excellency, which I thought was extremely bizarre, but that also highlights how much of a grip that Israel has in America, which I thought was that was a kind of a weird thing. But yeah, too many applause from this crowd, and there's a lot of frustration and anger in America of what they're seeing, and they know what, a lot of Americans see what's happening. People know how divisive this is, but it shouldn't be divisive. It shouldn't be divisive that more than 38,000 Palestinians have died. It shouldn't be divisive to understand that so many women and children have died as a result of this conflict. It's not divisive to accept that what Hamas have done October 7th was absolutely atrocious. It's not divisive to understand that Israeli soldiers have died as a result of this as well, and that Benjamin Netanyahu has made things worse for Israel and its reputation on the global stage. That despite politicians and world leaders trying to paint a better picture of Israel, doesn't change the facts. But one of the questions that was I brought up recently to me was, why was the difference between Netanyahu and Putin? And my logical conclusion is that Russia and Putin is invading a European country, and that Netanyahu's conflict is taking place in the Middle East. I think that was the best I could think of why there is an indifference. There really, really isn't of what the levels that are being shown here, guys. It's really, really bad. But let's read into this. So, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's feisty speech to Congress may have been delivered in Washington, but his words appeared aimed at an audience back home. Israelis heard their leader, a gifted audio with flawless English, delivered a forceful case for Israelis' actions in the war in Gaza. And on a global stage, he aimed to portray himself as a consummate statesman who embraced by the country, most importantly, ally at a time when Israel has never been more isolated internationally. The speech could help boost his political fortunes, but has left many Israelis disappointed. He gave no signs of substance progress on a ceasefire deal that could free the hostages still held by Hamas in Gaza, and he took no responsibility for security and policy failings under his watch that led to the Hamas deadly October 7th assault, which triggered the war and gave little indication on how he plans to address the crisis set off by the conflict, including the indefinite displacement of tens of thousands of Israelis in the country's south and north of the damage the war has caused to Israel's global image, not to mention the bleak future of Gaza, where tens of thousands have been killed, hundreds of thousands displaced, and vast areas decimated. Yeah, so this is the thing. The damage that is being caused by this is nothing short of really, really bad. We talk almost so much about what's happening in Gaza, but there's also obviously the conflict has that's also exacerbated on the north of the country as well by the Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon, the conflict that is taking place on there as well, which is obviously missiles and whatnot trying to get in. That's not helping the situation. Obviously, the Houthi rebels in Yemen, obviously firing missiles and whatnot into Israel from their point of view is obviously not helping as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of things that has increased the tension, the unnecessary tension as a result of what happened on October 7th and the retaliation by Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government on this as well. So, hostage families feel despair and disappointment nearly 10 months after their loved ones were seized by Hamas and other militias. The families of hostages are desperate for their relatives' return. They have directed most of their anger at Netanyahu, and that frustration was only exacerbated after his speech. Many expected the Prime Minister to use the global platform to declare progress in the ceasefire talks or even announce that a deal was reached, only to be greatly disappointed. As we speak, we're actively engaged in intense efforts to secure the release, Netanyahu told Congress in his only comments on the talks. I'm confident that these efforts can succeed. Some of them are taking place right now. Not only was there no grand declaration, but Netanyahu spent about 5 minutes of his nearly hour-long address talking about the plights of the hostages. If he didn't open with the words, "We have a deal," I don't care what he has to say, one Sharon Callaghan, the sister-in-law of a hostage of Ola Callaghan. This is the only thing that we want to hear. The hostage families and their struggles have become a potent force in Israel, where they can enjoy broad support. Thousands have protested weekly to highlight their plight and call on Netanyahu to resign. The war began with a militant assault on southern Israel that killed 1,200 people, most of them civilians, which took about 250 hostages. The health ministry in Gaza, which does no differentiating between civilians and combatants, and say more than 39,000 Palestinians have been killed in the conflict. Many Israelis support an end to the war if it would mean freedom for the remaining roughly 110 people who have not been released, a third of whom are said to be dead. The lack of emphasis on a ceasefire negotiation could have been a message to Netanyahu's far-right coalition party that a deal is not his priority. Those parties oppose the deal and say they will topple the government if one moves ahead, threatening Netanyahu's rule. They want the war to continue until Hamas is defeated, a goal Netanyahu repeatedly states as well. One of the first public reactions in the speech came from his far-right governing partner, National Security Minister Imran Ben-Gvir, who posted on social media platform X after the address that Israel heart Netanyahu. It succinctly captured how ultra-nationalist flank of Netanyahu's government viewed the speech. Netanyahu's critics, meanwhile, accused him of dragging out the war for political reasons to appease the far-right partners and ensure his coalition remains in place and he remains in office. Netanyahu's power defense of Israel is on a very public stage, garnering praise from some of his political rivals. And at a time when Israelis feel the world has moved on from October 7th attack, has lost interest in the hostages' faith, and has cast Israel as a bag. That's Netanyahu's speech, with its of soldiers' braveries in what he claimed was Israel's righteousness in the war, injected some sense of patriotism and hope. It's very hard for me to accept any kind of so-called righteousness of them when there's been so many videos and pictures of whatnot. Like some of the brutality of the Israeli Defense Forces, they have occurred on people, on some of the Palestinian people, whether they were Hamas or not. Some of the brutality has been nothing short of horrendous. That could score Netanyahu badly needed political points, said Avi Bushgos, a former advisor to the Israeli leader. There is a consensus in Israel that no one could have done it better, he said, but he added that political boost could be temporary because the reality of Israelis is grim. Netanyahu's speech painted a rosy picture of a wartime Israel, once that ignored the deep sense of betrayal many feel in their political and military leaders since October 7th. Did not mention the anger and uncertainty of tens of thousands of displaced Israelis. with the government offering them no solutions, nor did it grapple with the anguish Israelis feel every time another hostage is determined to have died in captivity. Hours after Netanyahu spoke, the military announced that the bodies of 5 hostages already known to be dead had been retrieved from Gaza in a rescue mission. Veteran Israeli broadcaster Elina Dallin opened her radio program on Thursday saying that through her speech, Congress was presented with a distorted reality. This is the Israel Congress members sought. Israel, the just, the capturing, the enlightening. Israel is the absolute good, which is winning total victory against absolute evil. An Israel that is so different to the one people here live and breathe, which is counting its dead and waiting for its hostages. It could not be more blind to the reality of what's happening in the world with such dangerous comments, guys. It really, really is. Like I said, there will obviously a piece, obviously, like it says in the piece there, obviously trying to appeal to some people, trying to continue to hold on to power, keeping those people of the far right happy, while also continuing to upset the world as it refuses to negotiate a ceasefire talk, which we know that there can be one done. So Netanyahu is happy to leave the hostages in the hands of Hamas every single day because he doesn't want to agree to a ceasefire talk. Because he knows if he does, as it says there, his government, the right wing of his government will fall apart, turn it back on him. He will be kicked out. He will lose his power. He may potentially have to face alleged criminal charges from the International Criminal Court, which obviously could mean quite bad for him. So, as of right now, Netanyahu wants to maintain the status quo with what's happening right now, at the expense every day of innocent Palestinian lives within inside the Gaza Strip, at the expense of Israeli soldiers who are getting shot and blown up and whatnot by sneaky Hamas attacks nearly on a daily basis inside the Gaza Strip as well. So that's the situation there. But Netanyahu is very careful about where he goes, because obviously if he goes to certain places, he will be arrested, and he knows he will be arrested. So the next one I got for you guys is from CNN. Obviously, we're not too far away now from Venezuela's election, which is coming up very, very soon. But the headline for this one, guys, is "The Woman Behind Venezuela's Upstart Opposition Movement." So obviously, Venezuela's opposition leader Marina Cortina Machuto waves during the campaign closing rally of presidential elections. Emmanuel Gomez ultras in Caracas on the 25th of July 2024 is where the picture was. I have very little to no faith of any kind of change in government whatsoever in Venezuela. I generally believe that the election will be rigged in Morodo's favour, and the status quo will not change here at all. Even if the people want it, it's not going to happen. And I know it's not going to. I say I know, but I feel that it's not going to happen because, quite frankly, like the US offered to work to change their oil over if they offers to do more cooperation with Venezuela if they basically had free and fair elections. And Morado promised free and fair elections, and obviously opposition leaders and political opponents started disappearing or being arrested for alleged crimes. And well, that kind of told you everything you needed to know. And I think the only reason this candidate hasn't been because he doesn't feel that she's going to win. But even if everyone voted for this candidate, I just don't think anything is going to change in Venezuela, if I'm honest. But let's read a bit more into it. As Venezuela grinds for what could be a historic presidential election this weekend, so that'll be the time of this, one of the most important names in the race isn't on the ballot. Marina Cortina Machuto, the woman who galvanized Venezuela's opposition movement and whom many voters see as the real challenger to socialist incumbent Nicolas Maduro. 12 years ago, Machuto introduced herself to Venezuela's political sense by confronting the late President Hugo Chavez in Congress. Chavez, then at the peak of his power, was delivering his annual State of the Nation address. Machuto, then a fringe opposition politician who lost her primary race to challenge Chavez for the presidency, stood up and shouted back at the president on the podium. Chavez dismissed her as an irritation, telling her an eagle doesn't hurt a fly. On Sunday, once again, Machuto will not be allowed on the ballot, but not for a lack of popularity. An avowed capitalist who has promised privatization in several states' industries, Machiko has won more than 90% of the opposition primary vote last year, but has been barred from running for office following allegations that she didn't include some VU vouchers on her asset declaration. Machiko has described the decision to bar her, upheld by Venezuela's Supreme Court, as illegitimate, unjustified, and unconstitutional. The current opposition candidate for President Emmanuel González is backed by Machado, who has campaigned on his behalf to mobilize voters. Experts say that their efforts now pose a most significant threat to Morodo's grip and power in years as he fights to claim a third term. The following is an interview that Machado gave to CNN International in Congress this week. It has been edited for clarity and length. So this is what they say in the interview. So they spoke many times that they're who say that they are planning in case things succeed at time. Have you considered that for yourself? They said, we will win, we will succeed and bring everyone that has been forced to leave to come back. That is my only plan. In the economy, your plan is to privatize most Venezuelan public assets, especially in terms of health, oil, and education. Do you think private education is a better response to the challenges that Venezuela youth face? He says, I am committed to giving every single Venezuelan the opportunity to have the education that they need to be independent and take hold of their future. I do believe in public education, but I do believe you have to have a creative incentive so the public education can be as competitive with the same degree of excellence that you have in private education. You must have the rules of the market. It's the system that works as well as the health system. I am convinced that education is a right. You didn't answer the question. But then, well, we shouldn't be surprised really here. Privatizing so much private public asset, health, oil, and education. That's so bad. So the rules of the market apply to the education sector. As a society and as a state, we have a duty to guarantee that every single Venezuelan has access to it. But we have to change all the way around. What do I promote, for instance? In the case of education, I believe in coupons that you can give directly to the parents so that their parents can choose the kind of education they want for their children, either public or private. That is a true revolution in Venezuela. In the case of the energy sector and other industries, Venezuela has huge potential that requires enormous investment. We don't have the resources for. This country is sacked. We need to open markets. And we need to create conditions so that they are competitive, so attractive that international resources will be invested in the country, despite what happened in the previous regime. One of the things we need to do is totally transform our judiciary system and come back from being the last place globally in the rule of law to one of the most respected countries. And you think privatization is going to be your key out of it? I really don't think Venezuela can talk about respected, considering, you know, this man's history and the history of Venezuela. Back to the energy sector. What are the best conditions for private investors? Does this mean taking away public ownership of crude oil that has been part of Venezuelan constitution for decades? He says we need tens of hundreds of billions of dollars that could be invested in energy, not just oil and gas, also renewable resources. The Venezuelan government doesn't have the resources to do that. The resources we need to invest in infrastructure, in health, in education, and so on. We definitely need to open markets in order to take advantage of the huge potential and turn Venezuela into a truly energy hub of the Americans. It's how the country will benefit. Why did they put it like that? How the country will that we will have physical flows and other resources mechanisms through which the state will get taxes. But you don't need to own the companies directly from the country to benefit from it. If we don't do that, a window of opportunity for oil and gas will close soon, and that will be unforgivable. Yeah, because you know that the world is turning away from oil and gas. Now that is definitely happening. So what do you think is going to happen on the 9th of July 28th when the result of the presidential vote is expected to be announced? The regime will try to steal the election, but I have full confidence in what the Venezuelan people vote for. We have built a platform to defend our votes. It's unprecedented. Today, Venezuelans realize that this is a personal responsibility. They don't expect others to defend their vote right. They're going to do it themselves, and you will see people coming out with their families together, willing to stay as long as it takes. Don't really believe quite a word from this man at all. It's interesting questions and answers there. I really should. I think it's definitely worth checking out the interview itself on CNN if I get a chance to, guys. But I will say, obviously, that like I said, this election that's happening this weekend, do I expect anything big to change? No. Do I think that there's going to be a new leader? No. Do I think the status quo is just going to carry on? Yes. And those who are in opposition are just going to be sitting on the sidelines as usual, guys, and it's not right in any way, shape, or form at all. So just before I go to the next article, guys, I just want to remind you, if you haven't already, please hit the like button. We greatly appreciate it. Share it across social media so others are notified of this video. And if you haven't subscribed already, please consider subscribing because it really does help support the channel. So thank you to everyone who has done so. It is greatly appreciated. So the next one I got for you guys is from the US. It's a big one for Kamala Harris here in the terms of the US presidential elections. The headline is Barack Obama has endorsed Kamala Harris for US president. The nod from the former US president and the First Lady Michelle Obama means that Harris has won the backing of all key Democrats. So this all but confirms, if it didn't all but confirm the Democratic Party pretty much behind Kamala Harris, this pretty much ends any kind of talk, any kind of speculation that someone else may step in is pretty much dead and buried now at this point. The momentum that she's riding on has been really, really good, and this endorsement at this particular time is obviously very good because when it was announced that obviously she was going to be going to be running, and Biden was stepping down. Obviously, there was quite a wave of push of donations going her way, a lot of endorsements from not just obviously fellow Democrats, but a lot of top-ranked celebrities as well. Barack Obama kind of kept back and waited for the right time to give his endorsement. And I think that just kind of spurs things a bit more for Kamala Harris as well. And it's a really, really good boost for her. You knew he was going to endorse her. We knew that. But it was just a case of when he was going to endorse her, I think is the right thing to say. But at the moment, the momentum is hugely in her favor. But that's just momentum. It's not how much hearts and minds are going to win over, obviously, will be a question. The other thing, the issue we have at the moment is at the time of this recording, there's no scheduled debate between the two because Donald Trump is running away from it. He's too chicken to face Kamala Harris. They were scheduled, obviously, originally it was supposed to be Biden versus Trump on ABC News, but when Biden obviously stepped down, Kamala Harris is going to be, looks like it's going to be the potential nominee. So it would have been Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris. All of a sudden, Donald Trump didn't want to do it on there because he thought ABC would be biased. So I don't know. So hopefully they will have a debate at some point. But if he doesn't, obviously it'll make him look bad in doing so as well because it emphasizes this point that Donald Trump is chicken. And obviously you don't want to be called chicken. But Michelle Obama and Barack Obama obviously giving their backing, obviously, is a nice boost as well for them. Do I still think she can win the presidency? I don't know. At the moment, the thing is that there's still several months between now and the voting days. A lot can change. Right now, the momentum is quite high on her. There's a lot of feeling of hope and all that kind of stuff. That is with such a dramatic change. But when things start to die down a little bit, are people going to be feeling the same thing about her? As people dive a little bit more deeper into her sort of thing, are people still going to feel the same thing? So right now, the momentum is very high, but doesn't mean to say that it couldn't swing back as well. But let's read a little bit more into this, you guys. So, Barack Obama has endorsed Kamala Harris to be the Democratic nominee for the United States president, which means the vice president has won the backing of all the Democratic Party's leading figures. We call to say Michelle and I could not be proud to endorse you and do everything that we can to get you through this election into the Oval Office, the former US President Barack Obama told Harris during a phone call, a video of which was posted on social media. I can't have this phone call without saying to my girl Kamala, I'm proud of you, former First Lady Michelle Obama said. This is going to be historic. The Obamas have had yet to announce their support for Harris after US President Joe Biden decided on Sunday to withdraw from the race. We told her we think she'll make a fantastic president for the United States and that she has our full support. Barack Obama posted on X on Friday about the call with Harris earlier this week. At this crucial moment in our country, we're going to do everything we can to make sure she wins in November. And there is the tweet from Barack Obama, obviously, That's quite a big endorsement, obviously. But I think it was expected. It was just a case of when. Barack Obama made history in 2008 by becoming the first African American president, and Harris hopes to make history as of her own, becoming the first woman and woman of color elected to lead the country. Obama remains one of the most popular figures in the Democratic Party, even after more than a decade has passed since he was last elected. And he has lent his support to Biden, who was his vice president during big money fundraisers. Harris expressed her gratitude for the Obamas' endorsement and their long friendship, and she has known the Obamas since before his election in 2008. Thank you both for being so much, and we're going to have so much fun with this too, aren't we? Harris said. Harris's bid against the Republican candidate and former President Donald Trump continues to gain steam from supporters, donors, and politicians less than a week after Biden bowed out of the race. Yeah. So obviously the biggest, I guess another question is, obviously as it looks now, looks almost pretty much hands on that Harris is going to be the candidate for Democrats. The question is, who's going to be the VP? That's going to be an interesting question as time passes on. Who is going to be the one to stand? Who's going to be the one at the side of Kamala Harris in this race? Now, I'm not going to speculate and give any names, but I will say, obviously, it will be interesting to see who will get the nod. I imagine it will be. It's got to be somebody that will be a right fit as a VP. I imagine it will be. I don't imagine it will be another woman. I imagine it will be a male. But it will certainly be quite big in doing big in doing so as well. But as for the endorsement, obviously, like I said, it was expected. We shouldn't be surprised about this. And obviously, at the moment, momentum is high. Everything looks very nice and rosy. Things look very strong. Former prosecutor. She's dealt with Donald Trump's type, because obviously he's a felony. He's a felon, and many other things. So we'll obviously have to see how things go, you guys. Speaking of how things are going, we're going to take a little break in between, guys. I got a couple more stories for you guys here on the World's Newsround. I hope you guys enjoyed this little funny video I've got for you guys from Foil and Arms. It's a really foil one. Especially if you're from Scotland, you'll probably like this one. Get a good laugh out of this one too. The headline is, "This is Getting Past Scottish Immigration." Oh dear.
Right, lads, before granting you entry to Scotland, you must first answer these simple questions. What is the main language spoken here in Scotland?
What?
What is the main language spoken in Scotland?
English.
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 Questions are going to get more difficult, boys.
English.
What was chosen as the national flower of Scotland?
Oh, a weed.
Aye. Who has done more for Scottish independence in the last 5 years than anybody else?
Boris Johnson.
Aye. What piercing, high-pitched Scottish music somehow still remains popular to this day?
Travis?
Aye. What is the most celebrated sporting result in Scottish history?
When England lost the Euro 2020 final.
Aye, good times. What is apparently safe enough to store in Scotland, but dangerous enough to protect England?
Trident nuclear warheads.
Aye, safe my arse. The Old Firm Derby is a rivalry in which popular sport?
Boxing.
Aye. Traditionally in sporting events, if a Scottish person wins, they are known as...
British.
Aye, and if they lose...
Scottish.
Go figure. Which beloved fictional character in literature and then film was inspired by the city of Edinburgh?
Oh, the Spud from Trainspotting.
Aye.
Yeah.
What former Scottish leader is accused of spreading disinformation?
Mel Gibson.
Bastard. What monster is Scotland famous for?
Frankie Boyle.
Yeah.
Legend. Which nation invented whiskey?
Not England.
I'll accept that. And finally, the Edinburgh Fringe Festival is the biggest what in the world?
The biggest arts festival.
No, pain in the arse.
We're doing a show. Would you like a flyer?
Yeah,
No, wouldn't I like a flyer? Get out.
It's 9:15 at Bristol Square in the Kewan Hall. If you just want to check it out.
I've changed my mind.
Sure, it's a great...
Hogwash
Like,
is-
if you don't...
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, you shouldn't have upset him, guys. Should not have upset him. Oh dear. It's quite they say it's really easy to get. They say it's very easy to get into. I thought it was supposed to be very easy to get into Scotland, but apparently not, guys. Apparently not. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Right, guys. So, sticking with on the other side of the world, we were sticking with going back to South America. Well, America, South America-ish, sort of. This is quite an interesting one that I picked up here from France 24. So, the US have arrested Mexican drug kingpin El Magno Zambada and the son of El Chapito. Chapio. I hope I mispronounced those names right. So, with boundaries of several $1 million offered for their capture, the Mexican drug lords Ismael Almadio Zabarita and Joaquin Guzman Lopez, the son of the famous El Chapo, were at the top of the most wanted list for U.S. authorities. The two leaders of the Sinaloa cartel were arrested on Thursday after landing in Texas on a private plane. But as the cartel is one of the most powerful organized crime groups in Mexico, the power vacuum resulted in their arrest could trigger a new bout of violence. Yes, because when... Unfortunately, the way the system works, unfortunately, when it comes to gangs and whatnot, is that even though you capture the heads, you capture the heads of these gangs, someone else tries to grow a head in its place, and all the others fight over to reign supreme, which leads to new and bigger violence because everybody wants a bigger slice of the pie because people are greedy, people get jealous, people get envious. And people get ambitious, hungry, power. Some of the natural human emotions that run through certain people. So yes, even despite them, the US have arrested these, doesn't change the fact that more violence can now be triggered as a result of this. So there's a picture of them. Let's have a read. So the Mexican drug kingpin Ismael Almadio Zambada and the son of his ex-partner Joaquin El Chapo Guzman were arrested on Thursday in El Paso, Texas, in a major coup for U.S. authorities that may also reshape the Mexican criminal landscape. Zambada is one of the most consequential traffickers in Mexico's history and co-founders the Sinaloa cartel with El Chapo, who was extradited to the United States in 2017 and is serving a life sentence in a maximum security prison. Both Zambada and Joaquin Guzman Lopez, the son of El Chapo, faced multiple charges in the US for funneling huge quantities of drugs to US streets, including fentanyl, which has surged to become the leading cause of death for Americans between ages of 18 to 45. Zambada, who is believed to be in his 70s, and Guzman Lopez, who is in his 30s, were detained after landing in a private plane in the El Paso area, the two US officials told reporters. Guzman Lopez, one of the four sons of El Chapo, known as Los Chapocos or Little Chapos, who inherited their father's faction of the Sinaloa cartel. His brother, Ovidio Guzman, was arrested last year and extradited to the United States. And in recent years, the Sinaloa cartel has become the biggest target for US authorities, who have accused the crime syndicate of being the largest supplier of fentanyl to the United States. Zambada and Guzman Lopez face multiple charges in US for heading the cartel's criminal operations, including the deadly fentanyl manufacturing and trafficking networks, the U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland has said in a statement. The arrest of Guzman Lopez was first reported by Reuters ahead of the Justice Department statement, where it was confirmed they were detained in El Paso. One worker at the Santa Teresa airport near El Paso on Thursday afternoon told Reuters that he saw a Beechcraft King Air land on the runway where federal agents were already waiting. Two individuals got off the plane and they were calmly taken into custody, said the man who declined to share his name out of concern for his safety. He seemed like a pretty calm arranging thing, he added. The US authorities had a $15 million reward for Zambada's capture, while Lopez had a $5 million bounty on his head. The Sinaloa cartel traffic drugs to more than 50 countries around the globe and is one of two of the most powerful organized crime groups in Mexico, according to U.S. authorities. Zambada and El Chapo's sons belong to two different generations of traffickers with different styles. Zambada is known for being an old-school mafia, avoiding the limelight and operating in the shadows. El Chapo's son, by contrast, has a reputation for being flashy narcos who courted attention as they ascended the ranks of the cartel. El Chapo's son is also known to be more violent and more hot-headed than Zambada, who has a reputation as a shrewd operator. Zambada and El Chapo's sons have had a fractious relationship since their father was extradited in 2017, and the arrest of Zambada and Guzman and Lopez may trigger instability or even violence in their heartlands in the northern state of Sinaloa. Previous arrests of important cartel leaders have triggered violence as the power vacuum opens, leading to significant infighting within the organization between them and their rivals. This possibility certainly looms very large, said Rama Philip Brown, a researcher at Washington's Brookings Institution, who closely monitors Mexican security. Their arrests were part of a joint operation by the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Homeland Security, the SHI agencies. The HSI had said in the statement. And U.S. authorities over the past year launched fresh indictments against Zambia and Guzman's sons on new charges in the United States that focus on fentanyl smuggling, as well as the flow of precursor chemicals to the illegal labs operations by their crime syndicates. Over decades, the cartel set up synthesized supply chains to move drugs across the globe and to source heavily regulated chemicals to their home base in Sanyara. Earlier in the day on Thursday, Retros published an investigation that reveals how fentanyl precursor chemicals are astonishingly easy to cheap to buy online from Chinese sellers that ships the substances door to door in North America. Fentanyl is the deadliest drug threat to our country has ever faced, and the Justice Department will not rest until every single cartel leader, member, and associate responsible for poisoning our communities is held accountable, Garland had added. But even if you caught them, caught more gang leaders, it's just more heads are just going to raise up as a result of it. Unfortunately, this is a never-ending cycle. There's never a solution to this situation. It's always a case of trying to catch the heads behind it, trying to reduce the trade. It's a never-ending battle. It appears to be between the US and Mexico, over this. There's never been a concrete solution to this crisis. If it's not fentanyl, it's something else. There's always something new coming into the US from this. Yeah, and it's like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm glad they've caught the drug kingpins, and obviously, and they need to pay for their crimes and whatnot. But it's not going to change a lot. It may change. The drugs may be reduced. Less flow may be coming in, but they're still going to have ways. There's always going to be new heads going to try and take up. It just means more will continue the same. But then I suppose people will say, well, Regan, what's the solution? I don't have a solution. The answer is I don't have a solution. But I do think it is I do believe there is a solution. I just don't know what that solution is. It's a frustrating one, to say the least, you guys. Speaking of these guys, what do you guys make of this story? Pingu says he really likes that. He says he would wish you. Pingu thinks he could be a mafia boss. I don't agree. I don't agree with that, Pingu. I don't think you would be a very good mafia boss. Ollie honestly just doesn't give a shit. Ollie's like I don't care. I'm not in the mood. And Cash Dummy, of course, is one of the lurkers hiding behind, just like those who lurk in the videos and don't say anything at all. So next up for you guys is a piece from The Guardian. But just before I go to that, guys, just want to remind you, this YouTube channel is one of the ways that you can financially support me in the work that I do here. You can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p. 99p may not sound like a lot of money, guys, but it really does make a massive difference. That 99p a month gives you access to custom emojis like the gang behind me I've just showed you there. Also, whenever you comment on any of my videos, I always give you a response. Sometimes it takes me a couple of days to respond, but I do respond to YouTube members' comments in my videos. And if you're a $2.99 member, you get access to early access to content as well. And also, as members, you also get access to community posts whenever I post any community members special posts as well. And like I say, $2.99 members, they get earlier access to content before anybody else as well. So thank you to everyone who has supported me. You can also support me by super chat if there's Prime Premier for Premier members as well. And other ways, if you want to financially support me outside of YouTube, you can do so by buying me a coffee. Link for that is in the description, or joining me on Patreon. A link for that is down below as well, which you get access to additional exclusive content on Patreon if you join there as well. And I actually get a better percentage from Patreon than I do on YouTube. So thank you to everyone who has financially supported me in any way. It's greatly appreciated. This one from The Guardian, guys. I'm not sure about this one, if I'm honest. So, green economy could generate 3.3 million jobs across Africa by 2030, a report has said. Policymakers and funders are being urged to invest in training a workforce to serve the institutes of the future. So, why did I say I'm not so sure about this one? Well, I don't know how much Africa and African nations are going to invest enough in green energy. Now, obviously, it's a case of, it's not just a case of these nations, obviously, creating the economies and the wealth they need to be able to invest in these green areas, but also the aid that they are getting from other nations as well to be able to do that. I'd like to think that this is going to work, but I'm not holding my breath either at the same time about this, because I just feel like there's way too many issues in many countries in Africa that are not being dealt with, and like throw aid at the UN and whatnot. Like that, more nations on a global scale should be doing more to de-escalate and sort out conflicts that are taking place, not just in the ones that we talk about all the time, but what's happening in certain nations. You know, like Democratic Republic of Congo, for example, has been in crisis for a long time. What's happening in Haiti? Is enough being done about that as well. The situation in Myanmar as well. So, you know, on a global issue, I'm happy that they're looking to push for green economy, but but at the same time, I'm also acutely aware of the situations that are taking place in some of the African nations as well. But let's read into this, guys. So, a greener economy could bring millions of jobs to some of the largest countries in Africa, according to a new report. So, research by the development agency FSD Africa and the impact advisory firm Shortlist predicts that 3.3 million jobs could be generated across the continent by 2030. Forecasting green jobs in Africa predicts that 60% of the roles, mainly in the renewable energy sector, will be skilled or white-collar positions that can spur the growth of the middle class in countries with higher growth sectors, such as renewable energy, e-mobility, construction and manufacturing. This report was based on the forecast from 5 countries: the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ethiopia, Kenya, Nigeria and South Africa. And that the study says that more than a fifth of the jobs expected from the green transition over the next 6 years. If this all comes to fruition, which I don't, at the moment I don't, I'm very skeptical about it, especially from some of these countries. Like I said, they're not in the best place. Republic of Congo right now. There's Kenya's not in a good place right now, especially with what's happening with the government right there. Ethiopia obviously has its challenges, we know. Nigeria has had its Nigeria and South Africa respectively have also had their issues as well. I would say out of the 5 countries at the moment, South Africa is probably a bit more minded at the moment. But I'd want to believe that these countries will can transition it over these in the next 6 years. But I'm not holding my breath on it either. About 10% of the jobs will create demand university degrees. 30% will be specialised at work that requires a certification or vocational training, and 20% administrative. Unskilled labour will be more stable with opportunities for upward mobility, the study predicts. This is the first public report that would take seriously the notion that human capital and talent is more important than the input of a green economic growth, and as a positive outcome in the form of millions of new direct jobs, said Paul Baloff, the CEO of Shortlist. The renewable energy sector will generate about 70% of jobs, and roughly 1.7 will be in solar power, DRC and Ethiopia. Africa's largest and second largest hydropower potential will see jobs in that sector. Agriculture should employ hundreds of thousands, with more than half of those jobs in climate smart technology. Researchers call on policymakers, funders and educational institutions to invest in training in a workforce in the green industry, saying it could contribute to the formalisation of African economies, and that the inclusion of whole populations in a stable system of remuneration, social security and taxation. So policymakers and funders and workforce developers need to step up to meet this year's term demand with efficient training, apprenticeship and job skill matching in the hopes of achieving Africa's green promise, said Berloff. With its young workforce and vast renewable energy resources, Africa can leapfrog into renewables, skipping over the carbon-intense pathways taken by industrialised countries. But the report authors argue that it will require supportive politics, infrastructure and significant financial investment, estimated over £100 billion annually. £100 billion is not the kind of money I actually see in African economies in any way, I don't believe. But that doesn't mean to say that they still can't achieve this. But there are a great deal of challenges with these. This is a wind power station in Nairobi, Kenya. It's one of 5 countries reported to believe to see the rapid growth there. So they've got wind farms in Kenya. So, which is obviously a good sign. A good signs there. African countries have struggled to attract renewable energy investment due to the investors' perception of risk of concern over commercial viability. The continent receives only 3% of global clean energy funding to meet climate and energy access to development goals. Investments need to more than double over £155 billion a year by 2030, according to International Energy Agency, the IEA, and the African Development Bank. You need a base level of good skills in the country to get investors comfortable putting their money into green investments. Those jobs de-risk investment flows into or within the country. If the finances flow, then projects will get to be realised and we will create even more new jobs, said Kevin Mogul, Director of Deployment Impact at FSD Africa. Some countries, especially those with oil and gas reserves, continue to push back on calls for Africa, which accounts for less than 4% of global carbon emissions, to evaluate carbon reduction goals over domestic products such as fossil fuels for economy growth or domestic energy, when 600 million Africans do not have access to electricity. This is still a big problem. This is an issue that still needs to be addressed. Momo said that while there is a need to think about a just transition, green growth provides critical potential for jobs and economic growth. There is a significant opportunity here to address what is quickly turning into a democratic crisis, said Mogul. Africa has the youngest, fastest growing workforce, but the youth need jobs. Jobs definitely need to be created for the next generation of children, the next generation, that is for sure. Not just, I've talked about this in my channel about how important it is about creating jobs that in the UK. And obviously on a global scale, for the next generation of back to kids, wherever they may be in the world, creating those right jobs matters. And I'm all for this stuff, guys. I really, really am. I'm all for this, but it's just a case of if it can be done, if it can be achieved. I'm very skeptical about the possibility of doing it, if it can be done, because of the fragilities that Africa has gone through. And it still continues to go through now. Many of the countries still continue to go through. Like Sudan, for example, is a highlighted one that has many, many problems. So I do struggle to have that belief. But at the same time, I'm going to, hopefully, over time, we will start to see more of this happening. And hopefully more opportunities for young African kids as well to be able to develop into these jobs. And obviously create, not just to help build a green economy, but obviously for them to be able to have a good and lasting life, being able to do so as well. And speaking of Africa, speaking of Sudan, the final story I have for you guys is one from the New York Times, and it is a special piece on Sudan. And I think, as I've said, I don't really spend a lot of time talking about Sudan. This one is going to be quite an interesting piece. The headline for it is, as starvation spreads in Sudan, military blocks aid truckers at border. It's a country torn apart by civil war that could soon face one of the world's worst famines in decades, experts says. Fleeing hunger and war, Sudanese families like Adam Omar Osman, his wife Fatima Hassan, and their 4 children crossed from Dhofar region to a refugee camp in Chad this month. This is, we talk a lot about the situation in Gaza. This is one where is under the radar a lot, guys. And I wouldn't say that looking forward is not the right word. I'm very fascinated to see this piece that kind of deep dives into the situation that Sudan is in, because it is something that we need to talk about more and needs to be highlighted more, which is one of the reasons why I do try to cover as much different stories as I can. And it has been a while since I've done a piece on Sudan, I feel. So let's read right into it, you guys. So as Sudan hurdles towards famine, its military is blocking the United Nations from bringing enormous amounts of food into the country through a vital border crossing, effectively cutting off aid to hundreds of thousands of starving people during the depths of a civil war. Experts warn that Sudan, barely functioning after 15 months of fighting, could soon face one of the worst famines in decades. But the Sudanese army's refusal to let UN aid convoys through the crossing is thwarted by the kind of all-out relief effort that aid groups says needs to prevent hundreds of thousands of deaths, as many as 2.5 million according to one estimate, by the end of the year. The risk is greatest in Dufar, the Spain-sized region that suffered a genocide 2 decades ago. One of 14 Sudanese districts at immediate risk of famine. 8 are in Dufar, right across the border that the United Nations is trying to cross, and time is running out to help them. The closed border port, a subject of increasing urgent appeals from the American official, is at Adri, the main crossing from Chad into Sudan. And at that border, little more than a concrete bollard of a dried out riverbed, just about everything seems to flow. Refugees and traders, four-wheeled motorbikes carrying animal skins, and donkey cart litters with barrels of fuel. What is forbidden from crossing into Sudan, however, are the UN's trucks filled with food that are urgently needed in Darfur, where experts say 440,000 people are already on the brink of starvation. Refugees fleeing Darfur are now saying that hunger, not conflict, is the main reason that they leave. A man tries to whip control of a crowd of Sudanese refugees who were joisting to receive food during an impromptu aid distribution in the outskirts of Andre refugee camp. These people desperate for food. This picture here, nearly 200,000 people squeezed into a single camp in Andre that sprawls into the surrounding desert. Shelter is scarce and there's not enough food or water. And you can see some of these encampments that they have here. Like, they're not even properly sheltered, some of them. Some of them getting barely no privacy at all. This is what the conditions that they are in. And this is a recently arrived refugee living in a makeshift shelter in the camp as well. You can see the family there. Literally just putting it together. A mother of three, Bahima, if I mispronounce any names, I apologise. Bahima Mushkala slumped with exhaustion under a tree after her family migrated to Chad at the Andre crossing. It had been a frightening 6-day journey from the besieged city of Al Fashir along roads where fighters threatened to kill them. She said, but the families felt they had little choice. We had nothing to eat, Miss Mishkar said, motioning to the children squatting beside her. She said they often subsidised on a single shared pancake per day. The Sudanese military imposed the edict at the crossing 5 months ago, supposedly to prohibit weapons smuggling. It seems to make little sense. Armed cash and fighters continue to flow in Sudan elsewhere on the 870-mile border that is mostly controlled by its enemy, a heavily armed paramilitary group known as the Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF. The military doesn't even control the crossing at Eldel, where the RSF fighters stand 100 yards behind the border at Sudanese side. So yeah, obviously here from Chad, Edri here, obviously the crossing there. They think that their weapons are getting through there, but clearly they're getting their weapons somewhere else and just don't know where. Even so, the UN said it must respect the order not to cross from the military, which is based in Port Sudan, 1,000 miles to the east, because it is Sudan's sovereignty authority. Instead, UN trucks are forced to make an arduous 200-mile detour north to time, a crossing controlled by militia aligned with the Sudan's army, where they are allowed to enter Darfur. The diversion is dangerous. Expenses takes up to 5 times as long to going through Edri. Only a fraction of the required aid is getting through time. 320 trucks of food since February, UN officials said, instead of the thousands that are needed. The time crossing was closed for most of the week after seasonal rains turned the border into river. Between February, where the Adri border crossing was shut, and June, the number of people facing emergency levels of hunger went from 1.7 million to 7 million. This heavy rain marked the start of the season in the Adri camp there. This is a picture of a refugee who just fled the territory in Darfur controlled by the Rapid Support Forces, take shelter under a donkey cart and plastic sheeting at a camp in Chad. Because they got nowhere else they got nothing else. This is their only protection from the rain. Another recently arrived refugee gathered on the outskirts of Adri camp, where they're waiting to be registered and allocated space there as well. All these camps, all these people, innocent kids, all of them, guys. As the prospect of mass starvation in Sudan grows closer, the Adri closures become the central focus of efforts by the United States. By far the largest donor to ramp up the emergency aid effort, this obstruction is completely unacceptable, Linda Thomas Greenfield, the United States ambassador to the UN, recently told reporters. Getting aid into Darfur was difficult even before the war. Our trade is roughly equivalent to the Atlantic to the west and the Red Sea to the east, about 1,100 miles as the crow flies in either direction. Roads are rutted, lined with bribe-seeking officials and prone to seasonal flooding. A truck leaving the port of Doskar on the west coast of Cameroon takes nearly 3 months to reach the Sudanese border, one UN official has said. Blame for the looming famine is hardly limited to the military. The Rapid Support Forces also paved its path, and since the war started in April 2023, their fighters have scattered millions from their homes, burning factories to make baby food and looting aid convoys. They continue to rampage through Sudan's breadbasket regions, which were among the most productive in Africa, causing massive food shortages. And the international response to Sudan's plight has largely been partly slow and lacking in urgency. At a conference in Paris in April, donors pledged $2 billion in aid for Sudan, just half of the requested amount, but those pledges have not been fully delivered. In the teeming refugee camp in eastern Chad, the lack of funds translate into desperate living conditions. Once again, carts carrying gasoline are permitted to cross the El Dorado into Sudan. Porter said the fuel is used by the Rapid Support Forces, apparently. In Adel, nearly 200,000 people are squeezed into single transit camps that spill into the surrounding desert. Latter is overflow, shelter is scarce. UN agency Refugee manages refugee camps in Chad. Says its operations were 21% funded in June. The World Food Programme was recently forced to cut rations because it lacked money. As rain pelted down, Ishka Edris, 22, huddled under a plastic sheet, gripping it tight against the gusts of wind as she nursed her 4-month-old daughter. Her 3 other children squatted beside them. We sleep here, she said, referring to the soggy ground. With just 3 beds were empty and a malnutrition centre run by Doctors Without Borders, filled with starving infants. The youngest was 33 days old, a girl whose mother had died in childbirth. In the next bed, laid Mullah Salah, a 20-month-old boy whose thinning hair and gorge features were classic symptoms of malnutrition. He had arrived in Chad last November after gunmen stormed into his family home in El Janiga across the border in Darfur and killed his grandfather. I shot him in front of our eyes, said Mullah's mother. Abila Abet now struggling to survive on the MENA UN rations. Whatever we get isn't enough, she said, spooning formula into Mali's mouth. That's the picture of the child there. Mulin Kaskar, 20-year-old, held her 5-year-old son, Ashwa Imran, at a malnutrition centre run by Doctors Without Borders in Edri, where he was treated with an infected wound on his arm that stemmed from continuous irreversible treatment for the malnutrition. And here's another child, Dibula Ibrek, and her grunt 20-month-old son, Mullah Salah, at the malnutrition centre as well. And the camp's residents filling water containers, they received as little as 6 litres of water a day, 1/3 of a recommended minimum they are getting. The situation is much worse in Darfur, where just a handful of aid groups are still working with international staff. The UN, which pulled out at the start of the war, works through local organisations. The World Food Programme said it can reach just 10% of the people in need. In a survey released last week, Mercy Corps said 1/4 of children in central Darfur stated that were so now malnourished that they could soon die. Experts said that only the World Food Programme, the world's largest humanitarian organisation with a budget of $8.5 billion a year, has the resources and expertise needed to ramp up the emergency operation at scale. But without unprecedented access at the border, providing aid is proving extremely challenging. It takes trucks several extra days just to reach the border crossing at time, just to cross into Sudan. Trucks need permit issues by the authorities to Port Sudan, and it can take weeks to arrive, if they do at all, aid officials have said. It's like, I'm glad that US have acknowledging the situation here, but it's still not something that the world is talking about enough. Nowhere near enough. It's deeply frustrating to me, the lack of talk about the crisis here in Sudan. In an interview with Sudan's ambassador to the UN, Al Harris Adres El Hadida Mahmoud defended the Arvin closure, citing evidence collected by Sudanese intelligence of arms smuggling. He said the UN was happy with the arrangement of routing trucks north through the border at time. He added that foreign countries predicted a famine in Sudan were relying on old figures and seeking a pretext for international intervention. He said, "We have seen deliberate, meticulous politicization of humanitarian aid to Sudan from the donors. At the edge crossing the military's inability to control anything entering Sudan is starkly impotent. Porters with donkey carts said they delivered hundreds of barrels of gasoline that are consumed by the RSS four-wheel drive vehicles, which are usually mounted with guns." Well, at least they got football, I suppose, for the kids to pass the time. That helps. Barber trims hair in a makeshift shop in the elderly camp as well. That's good. So there is some signs of life there. Men's clothing for sale at an elderly camp as well. And some kind of makeshift camp that is working in some aspects, I would say. Little, but still. And farther north, the RSS powerful patron in the United Arab Emirates continues to smuggle weapons and cash across the ponderous border, several Western officials have said. The swelling crisis has brought recriminalisation inside the aid community. In private aid workers and American officials say the UN's leadership should be more forceful, urging the military to reopen the Al crossing. Some wonder why the organisation has not lined up trucks at the border, as it did in Gaza last year, to step up the pressure. The UN's humanitarian coordinator in Sudan did not respond to questions for this story. In Washington, intelligence briefings provided to the State Department and the White House have confirmed the stark projections issued by aid groups for mass famine-related deaths by the end of this year, said a senior American official who spoke on conditional autonomy to discuss private deliberations. The coming famine is likely to be as deadly as the one in Somalia in 2011, the official said, and by the worst estimates could match the Great Ethiopia Famine of the 1980s. To override the blockage of Adwell, American officials, including Miss Thomas Greenfield, have called on the United Nations Security Council to permit UN trucks to cross at Adrian without military authorization, as what happened earlier with cross-border aid into Syria. But analysis said that Russia, which recently offered arms to Sudan military, would likely veto such a resolution. The other hope now is the fresh ceasefire talks announced this week and mediated by the United States are scheduled to start in Switzerland in mid-August. In an interview, US envoy to Sudan Tom Perrillo said he would be pressing both sides to allow for humanitarian access, even if they show up for the talks. And last picture there, at sunset prayers at the Erdui refugee camp in Chad. I hope you found that quite informative, guys, about the situation in Sudan. Without a shadow of a doubt, the situation is getting worse in the country. This conflict is no signs whatsoever of it ending anytime soon, guys, and it's absolutely horrible, horrific, and it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. You know, I just feel like the world doesn't care because it's an African country. That's how I feel. I feel like the world doesn't care because it's an African country. I mean, if it was in Europe, if it was in the Middle East, probably would have more attention. But because it's in Africa, people don't pay much attention to it. And you look at the situation that all these people are in. It's absolutely barbaric. It's horrible. It's a horrible situation. And I just wish people would talk more about it, guys. I really, really do. I hate talking about this. I really do. But at the same time, I feel if I don't, I feel bad not talking about it. I don't always get a chance to cover some stories out there. But I do take what's happening in Sudan really seriously. And I just wish that world leaders did not just acknowledge what's happening, but do more to ensure it. I know that many people will say that it's not just a case of throwing money at situations, but just breaking down barriers. And this conflict is a result of two petty generals. This conflict. This isn't because of the people. Yeah, this isn't because of the people of Sudan. This is a result of two petty generals. This is what this all is. They came very close to finally having some democratic process, some kind of civilized civilian government. And then these two generals decided to change that. And now you have the situation you're in. And these people, they just want to live in their homes, have their homes, have jobs and whatnot, and live their lives. And they can't do that because of these two petty generals on both sides of this. And that's the situation that they are in. So guys, what do you make of all the stories that we've covered here today? Talking about what's happening in Sudan, talking about the green economy in Africa, the US arrests of Mexican cartel bosses, Barack Obama officially endorsing Kamala Harris, what's been happening in Venezuela, and Benjamin Netanyahu and his speech in Congress. Let me know your thoughts about all these stories and more in the comment section down below. Thank you very much to anyone who's watched from the premiere video point. But just before I head out, just have one final question for you guys. If you haven't already, please hit the like button. It'd be greatly appreciated. Share it across social media so others are notified of this video, and subscribe because it really does help support the channel. And if you want to go one step further, financially support me in the work that I do here, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p, or join me on Rumble or Patreon for exclusive content on those platforms. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope to catch you all very, very soon.